Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. I know fractions, I know that word even scares you, but these are simple procedures. These are simple steps. Nothing to be scared of. Okay, first let's start with adding. Okay, let's say you've got 2/7 plus 1/3. Okay, now I know immediately what you want to do is say 2 plus 1 equals 3 and 7 plus 3 equals 10. But that is wrong. That's a big no-no. I'll tell you why. You cannot add or subtract fractions unless you have a like denominator. These are your denominators, the bottom number. And those are not like. That's a 7 and that's a 3. The denominator has to be the same before you can add or subtract them. So, I need to find a number that is a multiple of both 7 and 3. You want to find the lowest common multiple of 7 and 3. So what I tell my kids to do is to start out with the biggest denominator. In this case it's 7. 7 is bigger than 3. And you count by 7s until you find a number that 3 can go into. That way you know it's a multiple of both numbers. Okay, so let's start with counting by 7s. 7. Can 3 go into 7? No. What's next? 14. Can 3 go into 14? No. What's next? 21. Can 3 go into 21? Yes. Okay, so that's going to be our common denominator. Now, 7 times what gets 21? 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times what gets 21? 7. 1 times 7 is 7. Okay, so our new problem now looks like this. 6 over 21 plus 7 over 21. Okay, now I can add these two fractions together because they have a like denominator. So, 6 plus 7 is 13. And I know you're wanting to say 21 plus 21 and make this denominator over here 42, but that would be incorrect. The rule is, if the denominator is the same, the denominator stays the same. And the denominator is the same, so it's going to stay the same. And our answer is 13 over 21. Okay, let's do another example, except this time we are going to be subtracting. Okay, it's the same concept, except this time instead of adding, when you have a like denominator, you're going to subtract. So, let's say we have the fractions 5/6 minus 1/3. Remember what I said, you can't just take off and start subtracting. You have to get a like denominator before you can begin subtracting, and these denominators are not alike yet. So you got to find the lowest common multiple between 6 and 3. Remember my strategy. You start with the biggest denominator, which in this case is going to be 6. 6 is bigger than 3. And then you count by 6s until you find a number that 3 can go into. Okay, so let's start with 6. Can 3 go into 6? Yes. That is my lowest common multiple. That is going to be my new common denominator. Now, 6 times what gets 6? 1. 1 times 5 is 5. 3 times what gets 6? 2. Whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. 1 times 2 is 2. Now, we have a like denominator, 6, so now we can subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. And remember the rule, if the denominator is the same, the denominator stays the same. The denominator is both 6, it's the same, so it stays the same. Okay, but we always, always, always simplify our fractions. And you know 3/6 simplifies down to 1/2. 1/2 is our answer. Okay, let's do just one more example of subtracting. Let's say you have the fractions 8/15 minus 1/2. Now, remember, when you add or subtract fractions, you have to have a like denominator before you can subtract them. You can't just take off subtracting. You have to have a like denominator, and you do not yet. You're looking at 15 and 2. So you're looking for the lowest common multiple. To do that, the easiest way I've found for my kids is to start with the biggest denominator. In this case, 15 is bigger than 2, so you're starting with 15. And you're going to count by 15s until you find a number that 2 can go into. So let's start with 15. Can 2 go into 15? No, it's an odd number. 2 can't go into it. What's next when you're counting by 15s? 30. 30 is an even number. 2 can for sure go into 30. So that is going to be our new common denominator. Okay, now 15 times what gets 30? 2. 2 times what gets 18? No, sorry, excuse me. 8 times 2 gets what? 16. Okay, 2 times what gets 30? 15. Whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. 1 times 15 is 15. So, here's our new problem down here. And now I have a like denominator of 30, and I can subtract. 16 minus 15 is 1, and remember the rule, if the denominator is the same, the denominator stays the same. So your answer is 1/30. Okay, now we're going to multiply some fractions, which is my favorite to do. Let's say we've got 10/11 times 3/20. Now, when you multiply fractions, you have an option. You can just dive right in and multiply straight across. Or, to make your life easier, you can check and see if you can reduce the fractions before you multiply. For example, look at what's across from each other. 10 and 20 are across from each other. Now, is there something that can go into both of these numbers? Yes, 10. 10 can go into itself once and into 20 twice. Now, look at 3 and 11 across from each other. Is there anything with these two? Can anything go into both of these two? No, so you're going to leave those alone. Now you can multiply straight across. So, your new problem really looks like 1/11 times 3/2. 1 times 3 is 3. 11 times 2 is 22. Can you simplify this? Does anything go into both of these numbers? No. So this is your answer. Okay, let's do one more example of multiplying because that is just too easy. Alright, so let's say you've got 8/20 times 15/16. Okay, like I said, you have your option. You can just dive right in and start multiplying straight across, or you can look to see if you can reduce these fractions before you begin multiplying. So, let's look across from each other here. 8 and 16. Is there anything that goes into both 8 and 16? Yes, there is. 8. 8 goes into itself once and into 16 twice. Now let's look at 15 and 20. Think to yourself, is there anything that goes into both 15 and 20? Yes, there is. 5. So, 5 goes into 15 3 times. 5 goes into 20 4 times. Now you can multiply straight across. And your new problem really looks like 1/4 times 3/2. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. So the answer to this multiplication problem is 3/8. Okay, dividing fractions is about my kids' favorite because there's a fun rule. So let's say you have the fraction 6/7 divided by 2/21. Okay, I know that's looking a little scary, a little daunting to you, but there's a really fun, easy rule to help you remember what to do. And that is to keep, change, and flip in this order. So, first rule is to keep. So you're going to look at the first part of this problem, 6/7, and you're going to keep that. Second rule is to change. You're going to look at the second part of the problem, and you're going to change that division symbol into a multiplication symbol. Okay, and the third part of this rule is to flip. So you're going to look at the third part of the problem, and you're going to flip this fraction into its reciprocal. You're just going to flip it. Top goes to bottom, bottom goes to top. So 21/2. And now it's just a multiplication problem that you know how to do. Okay, so like I said with multiplication, you have your option. You can just go straight across, or you can make your life easier and see if you can reduce before you multiply. And you can. Look at what's across from each other here. 2 and 6. Is there anything that can go into both of these numbers? Yes, 2. 2 can go into itself once and into 6 3 times. Now let's look at 7 and 21. Is there anything that can go into both of these numbers? Yes, 7. 7 can go into itself once and into 21 3 times. And now I can just multiply straight across. 3 times 3 is 9, and 1 times 1 is 1. But we always simplify our fractions, and 9 divided by 1 is 9. Okay, let's do one more dividing fractions examples. So we've got 2/20 divided by 1/5. Remember your rule when you're dividing fractions. The first part of your rule is to keep. So you're looking at the first part of the problem, 2/20, and you're going to keep it as 2/20. You're going to look at the second part of the rule, change, and you're going to the second part of the problem right here, and you're going to change that division symbol into a multiplication symbol. Then you're going to look at the third part of the rule, flip. You're going to look at the third part of the problem and flip that fraction. Now you can multiply. Okay, but first I'm going to see if I can't make my life simpler and see if I can't reduce these fractions. Alright, so let's look at 2 and 1. Is there anything that can go into both 1 and 2? Yes, 1, but 1 goes into itself once, and 1 goes into 2 twice, so that's not going to change it. Let's look at the other direction. Okay, we've got 5 and 20. Can anything go into both of those? Yes, 5. So 5 goes into itself once and into 24 times, and then you just multiply straight across. 2 times 1 is 2, 4 times 1 is 4, and remember we always simplify our fractions, and you know 2/4 reduces down or simplifies down to 1/2.